They didn't just dominate the charts, they defined an entire decade of rock music, from nu metal's mainstream takeover to the garage rock revival, from emo's cultural explosion to stadium-sized alternative anthems. The 2000s reshaped the rock landscape in real time. Today, we're counting down the top 10 rock bands that defined the 2000s. But before anyone accuses us of bias, nostalgia, or recency favoritism, let's be clear about how this list was compiled. We used a multi-model consensus approach across 3 independent ranking frameworks, each using different weight distributions measuring chart performance, critical acclaim, cultural impact, and long-term influence. Some leaned slightly commercial, others leaned critical, others prioritized movement-shaping influence. Rather than averaging raw scores, we required positional agreement. For a band to claim a spot, at least 2 of the 3 independent methodologies had to rank them in that exact position. This majority consensus structure smooths out category bias and rewards consistency across competing evaluative lenses. If a band only dominated one metric, they didn't make this list. They had to matter commercially, culturally, critically, and historically. The result? Something that goes beyond just personal taste. It's an amalgamation of objective, measurable impact. Before we dive in, don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. It helps us keep these deep dives coming. And stick around until the end, because we've got 5 honorable mentions that just barely missed the cut. Let's get started. Number 10, The Killers. The Killers took the synth-infused new wave revival and turned it into a blueprint for alternative rock in the 2000s. Hot Fuss, released in 2004, wasn't just an album, it was a cultural reset. Mr. Brightside became one of the most iconic rock songs of the decade. Even now, nearly 2 decades later, it still gets played at every party, every wedding, every nostalgic throwback playlist. The album sold over 7 million copies and spawned multiple era-defining hits like Somebody Told Me and All These Things That I Have Done. What set the Killers apart was their Vegas glamour aesthetic mixed with this raw, emotional songwriting. They brought a theatrical element to alternative rock that felt fresh, polished, and undeniably catchy. Brandon Flowers and company proved you could be both critically respected and commercially massive in the 2000s. Number 9, Evanescence. Evanescence brought gothic symphonic rock to mainstream pop radio, and they did it so effortlessly that it almost seemed impossible. Fallen, released in 2003, sold over 17 million copies worldwide. Bring Me to Life wasn't just a hit, it was an iconic 2000s rock moment. That combination of Amy Lee's operatic vocals, the symphonic backing, and the nu metal crunch created something entirely unique. Evanescence had a major influence on female-fronted rock bands throughout the decade. They showed that you could blend darkness, vulnerability, and raw power into something that resonated with millions. Songs like My Immortal and Going Under became anthems for a generation navigating angst, heartbreak, and self-discovery. They bridged the gap between alternative metal and mainstream accessibility in a way few bands ever have. Number 8, System of a Down. System of a Down was unlike anything else in the 2000s. A band that combined metal, Armenian folk music, political commentary, and pure chaos into something completely original. In 2005, they released 2 albums simultaneously, Mesmerize and Hypnotize, and both debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. 2 albums, same year, both number 1. That's a level of dominance few artists ever achieve. But System of a Down wasn't just about chart success. They were the political metal voice of the early to mid 2000s. Songs like BYOB and Toxicity tackled war, corruption, and social issues with a ferocity and intelligence that most bands wouldn't even attempt. Serge Tankian's vocal range, Darren Malakian's unconventional riffs, and the band's willingness to be utterly unpredictable made them a rare combination. Critically acclaimed and commercially successful, System of a Down proved that metal could be intellectually provocative without sacrificing an ounce of intensity. Number 7, Foo Fighters. If there was one band that kept traditional alternative rock alive during the 2000s, it was Foo Fighters. While genres were splintering and evolving in every direction, Dave Grohl and company stayed the course, delivering anthemic, guitar-driven rock that felt timeless. They released multiple platinum albums during the decade, one by one, In Your Honor and Echoes, Silence, Patience, and Grace, all packed with radio hits like All My Life, Best of You, and The Pretender. These weren't just songs, they were arena-filling, fist-pumping rock anthems that connected with millions. Foo Fighters dominated the Grammy Awards and rock categories throughout the 2000s, but more than accolades, they maintained a consistency that few bands achieved. Dave Grohl's everyman appeal, his genuine love for rock rock music, and the band's relentless work ethic made them one of the most reliable forces in rock. In a decade where rock was fragmenting into subgenres, Foo Fighters proved that straightforward, hard-hitting rock and roll still had a massive audience. Number 6, My Chemical Romance. My Chemical Romance defined emo's mainstream breakthrough. They took the raw emotion of early 2000s emo and turned it into something theatrical, cinematic, and utterly captivating. Their 2004 album 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge was the breakthrough. Helena and I'm Not Okay, I Promise became instant classics and remain cultural touchstones to this day. If you were a teenager in the mid-2000s, you knew every word. These tracks became internet memes, generational inside jokes, and the soundtrack to countless MySpace profiles. But then came the Black Parade in 2006 and everything changed. It was a cultural phenomenon, a concept album about death, defiance, and the journey of a dying character known as the Patient. The ambition alone set it apart, but the execution, the sweeping orchestration, Gerard Way's soaring vocals, the anthemic choruses made it a masterpiece. Songs like Welcome to the Black Parade, Famous Last Words, and Teenagers were enormously impactful. My Chemical Romance didn't just make music, they created an entire aesthetic. The theatrical approach, the Black Parade uniforms, the unapologetic embrace of darkness and emotion. They influenced an entire subgenre's visual and musical identity. The album sold millions, but its cultural footprint went far beyond sales numbers. My Chemical Romance shaped mid to late 2000s Hot Topic culture, warped tour lineups, and the way an entire generation expressed their angst and identity. Number 5, The Strokes. The Strokes sparked the post-punk and garage rock revival of the early 2000s with a single album, Is This It?, released in 2001. That album became the blueprint for an entire wave of indie rock. Bands like Arctic Monkeys, Franz Ferdinand, and The Libertines all owe a debt to The Strokes. The raw, lo-fi production, the effortlessly cool aesthetic, Julian Casablancas' detached, slurred vocals paired with tight, angular guitar riffs. Critics adored it. Year-end and decade-end lists from major publications consistently ranked it as one of the best albums of the 2000s. It wasn't just influential, it was foundational. The Strokes brought this New York City cool to rock music. They made it okay to sound raw, to embrace imperfection, to prioritize vibe over polish. In a decade where production was getting slicker and more calculated, the Strokes reminded everyone that rock could still feel dangerous, immediate, and effortlessly stylish. Number 4, Coldplay. Coldplay dominated British rock's global expansion in the 2000s. They released 4 consecutive critically acclaimed albums, Parachutes, A Rush of Blood to the Head, X and Y, and Viva La Vida or Death and All His Friends, and sold over 40 million albums during the decade. But the numbers only tell part of the story. Coldplay transitioned rock music toward atmospheric, arena-friendly emotionalism. Chris Martin's falsetto, the band's sweeping, larger-than-life soundscapes, and their ability to craft songs that felt both intimate and stadium-sized set them apart. Songs like Yellow, Clocks, Fix You, and Viva La Vida became ubiquitous. These weren't just radio hits, they were cultural touchstones. Weddings, funerals, movie soundtracks, sporting events. Coldplay's music became the soundtrack to life's biggest moments. Their massive worldwide stadium tours cemented their status as one of the biggest rock bands on the planet. Coldplay proved that rock music could be emotional, vulnerable, and massively successful all at once. Number 3, The White Stripes. The White Stripes led the garage rock revival movement and created one of the most iconic rock songs of all time, Seven Nation Army. That bass line, except it wasn't even a bass, it was Jack White's guitar run through an octave pedal, became a global cultural phenomenon. Sports stadiums around the world adopted it as a chant. It transcended music and became a universal sound. Elephant, released in 2003, was a critical masterpiece. The album showcased Jack White's raw, bluesy guitar work and Meg White's primal drumming. Together they created this minimalist aesthetic that redefined what rock authenticity meant in the 2000s. The White Stripes influenced the entire indie and garage rock explosion that followed. Bands took note. You didn't need elaborate production, you didn't need a big lineup, you needed raw energy, vision, and the willingness to strip everything down to its essentials. Jack White became one of the most important figures in rock music, and it all started with the White Stripes' uncompromising approach to garage rock. Number 2, Green Day. Green Day didn't just define the 2000s, they revived punk rock for an entire generation. After years of relative commercial decline following Dookie's massive success in the 90s, they came roaring back with American Idiot in 2004. American Idiot was the defining political rock album of the Bush era. It sold over 16 million copies worldwide, swept the Grammy Awards, and eventually became a Broadway musical. The album tackled war, media manipulation, disillusionment, and American identity with a ferocity and intelligence that resonated with millions. Songs like American Idiot, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, Holiday, and Wake Me Up When September Ends were massive sing-along rock epics that captured the zeitgeist of mid-2000s America. Green Day's career resurgence sparked a pop-punk revival that influenced countless bands. They proved that punk rock could still be relevant, that it could still sell millions, and that it could still carry real cultural weight. Billy Joe Armstrong became the voice of a generation once again, and Green Day cemented their legacy as one of the greatest rock bands of all time. Number 1. Linkin Park. This was unanimous across all three models. Linkin Park didn't just define the 2000s, they dominated it. Hybrid Theory, released in 2000, became the best-selling debut album of the decade with over 27 million copies sold worldwide. That's not just commercial success, that's cultural ubiquity. Linkin Park pioneered the evolution from nu metal to alternative rock. They blended rap verses, electronic elements, heavy guitar riffs, and soaring choruses into something that felt entirely new. Chester Bennington's raw, anguished vocals paired with Mike Shinoda's hip-hop delivery created a dynamic that no one else could replicate. Songs like In the End, Crawling, One Step Closer, and Numb became generational anthems. MTV played them relentlessly. Radio stations couldn't get enough. The band's global reach was massive. They weren't just an American phenomenon, they were a worldwide force. Linkin Park influenced entire post-nu metal and emo rap fusion movements. Artists across genres, rock, hip-hop, electronic, cited them as an influence. They opened doors for experimentation, for genre blending, for taking rock music in directions people hadn't imagined. Their follow-up album, Meteora, was nearly as successful, proving that Hybrid Theory wasn't a fluke. Linkin Park was the real deal, a band that could evolve, innovate, and remain relevant throughout the entire decade. When you combine commercial dominance, critical respect, cultural impact, and long-term influence, no band from the 2000s comes close to Linkin Park. They were the sound of a generation, and they earned the #1 spot. Before we wrap up, let's talk about the honorable mentions, the bands that just missed the top 10 but absolutely deserve recognition. Number 11, Muse. Muse brought progressive rock to the mainstream with arena-filling epics like Absolution and Black Holes and Revelations. Their influence on modern alt-metal and prog revival is undeniable. Number 12, Arctic Monkeys. Whatever people say I am, that's what I'm not became the fastest selling UK debut album ever in 2006. They were pioneers of the internet era breakthrough and the post-punk dance revival. Their late decade emergence had massive influence. Number 13, Radiohead. Kid A in 2000 and In Rainbows in 2007 were critical masterpieces. Their pay-what-you-want distribution model revolutionized the industry. Radiohead was more influential on music culture than commercially dominant, but their art rock experimentation was at the highest level. Number 14, Queens of the Stone Age. Critical favorites throughout the decade, they brought desert rock and stoner rock to the mainstream with consistent quality and influence. Songs for the Deaf in 2002 became a defining heavy alternative album. Number 15, Nickelback. Yes, Nickelback. All the Right Reasons sold over 18 million copies. They were a post-grunge commercial juggernaut and dominated radio rock in the mid-2000s. Polarizing? Absolutely. Culturally impactful? Undeniably. Their cultural lightning rod status alone represents impact. The 2000s gave us three defining waves of rock music: nu metal and post-grunge holdovers, the garage and indie revival, and the emo and arena alternative explosion. Each movement shaped the decade in its own way, and the bands on this list represent the very best of what that era had to offer. What do you think? Do you agree with our list? Which band got snubbed? Which one ranked too high? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into 2000s rock, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, keep rocking, and we'll see you in the next one.